There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their back confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls the string.
Well, good morning, America. This is Connecting the Dots. It's Tuesday, July 30th, and we are going to have a couple of previous guests on today who are very, very special friends who share my love of freedom and who are trying to awaken the world to the reality of really of the deep state in 2019 and what sustainable development is all about. So today, as our guest, we've got Tom DeWeese and Pastor Matthew Cummings. And the reason that Pastor Matthew Cummings is on this call is because he is actually putting on a program at his church, and we are going to be doing a program on Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, and really what that means for America. And Tom DeWeese is going to be a presenter at that event as well as myself, and we are really looking forward to the opportunity to talk with Pastor Matthew's fellowship there. So good morning, gentlemen. First of all, Pastor Matthew, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. We will get into detail on this. I want to welcome Tom DeWeese. Tom is the founder and the president of the American Policy Center, the president, and he is also probably one of the most diehard expose personnel in the country, the 21 and 2030. He's been doing this forever, and he has written a number of books, and we're going to be talking about some of the things that he's doing in that regard. And we're going to expose what sustainable development is all about. So, Pastor Matthew, will you first start the program and kind of describe what you're trying to do with your program, your fellowship up in Kettle Falls?
Sure. I've been blessed to have taken over the pastorship of New Beginnings Fellowship in Kettle Falls, be close to about 2 years, and I've been trying to move the church in three areas. Obviously, the continued walk in believing that Jesus Christ is Lord and spreading the gospel of the kingdom of God. Number two has been to bring the congregation to a place of awareness that Christians are supposed to be more involved in the society, in, yes, the mission of the gospel, but also in what's going on politically and civically in our nation, and that we're to be more alert and astute to, a lot of the falsehoods and the lies that are being done in our nation. And then, of course, third, to reach out to the community overall to make them aware that their liberties are being assaulted. And this is the reason for this program. This is also our fundraiser. Instead of doing a revival, a normal revival where we would bring in preachers and ministers. We thought we'd do a revival of liberty.
Well, that's a great idea, Pastor Matthew. That's a wonderful idea. And, of course, I've talked to you about this before. You've been involved in our Red Pill Expo last year and other areas. And it's important that we get the reestablish the Black Robe Regiment, that kind of a mentality in the church, because quite honestly, since they've become tax-exempt organizations and fall under the 501c3 umbrella, boy, they've sure knocked a lot of the truth and a lot of the, let's say, the fiber out of the ministry.
That's true.
Well, kind of tell our listeners a little bit about your fellowship up there. What's your church? I know you're a Pentecostal minister. Kind of talk a little about some of the things that you are working on up there, and maybe we can talk a little bit about your project that you're trying to promote to get people to be more self-dependent and less dependent on the government.
Sure. Well, we've been, again, very astute in sharing our faith. Quite a bit of the working of the ministry has been in sharing Christ and seeing people's lives changed in a positive light. And also, the other thing that's been I've been made very aware is that up in the Kettle Falls area in Stevens County, just like in our urban areas in the cities, there are a lot of young men and women who unfortunately are on the government dole. And so this has brought a great concern to me, because the more a nation is dependent on your federal government for all of your dependency, then to me that's what creates the foundation for a socialist society. So we've been working towards reaching out in the community and beginning to discuss what I call the Self-Reliance Initiative, which would begin the process to help people move from dependency to independency, and establishing a program that would enable people to, through the initiative, gain different perspective on different jobs, hoping to bring conservative plumbers and other different professions in to help inspire people to move from being on the dole back into the workforce itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good program. I have a friend back in the Indianapolis area who is doing a very similar type of project, and what they're doing is they're taking former nonviolent, mostly drug-related prison parolees and trying to introduce them into job training skills as carpenters and getting them involved in that form of work, and it's been fairly successful. There's always going to be some folks that fall through the cracks, but for the most part, it's been a successful program, and it allows people who have a lot of, let's say, social problems, or maybe just don't understand what freedom is all about. It gives them an opportunity to work their way out of that system by learning how to gain skills in a particular area. And quite honestly, I think you know that as well as I do, right now the trades, I think, are the place to be if you want to make a decent living, because so few people have any real skills anymore. Our country is incredibly devoid of skilled tradesmen.
That's right. Agreed. And so that's where, that's the foundation that we're working to set up in Kettle Falls, and have also found that other parts of Washington have shown interest in the Self-Reliance Initiative as well. So it's beginning to gain some life.
Well, we need to realize that not everyone is going to respond positively to the message of, and we've got a lot of people in this country that still understand freedom. And we did a program not that long ago on the liberal plantation, where they provide all these programs that basically create a core group that they think will be dependable slaves for their liberal programs, and that they'll get they'll represent votes when they go to the poll. And there's a lot of people that are starting to wake up to the reality that there really isn't any such thing as a free lunch. We have a world that revolves around self-interest, whether people realize it or not, and the more they do to help themselves, the better off they are.
That's right.
Well, talk a little bit about the expose to trying to do in your upcoming event, and give our listeners a little bit of idea of how they can sign up for that event, and how they can find you and find your. I have a PDF flyer, but I had a hard time getting it downloaded to where I could actually send it out to a bunch of people. Maybe tell folks how they can learn more about your program, and how they can contact you, and where they can find out more about this program.
Sure. The event is on August the 17th. That's a Saturday at Marbo. It's about 25 miles north of Kettle Falls, in a place called Northport. And the Marbo community, a beautiful community of believers. Everyone owns their own land, very hospitable, very friendly, have agreed to allow us to do this event there. And so I have contacts for people who have more questions. The contact people are Kim, and her number is 509-675-3872, and Constance, 509-999-0444. And both are part of our New Beginnings Fellowship, and we'll be glad to give any information needed. Now, because not only is this a information, but also our fundraiser, there is a price for admission for individuals. It's $20. For families, it's $30. Children 5 and under to be free. For admission, you'll get food and music, hot dogs, hamburgers, good fellowship, and you'll learn about the fundamentals and all that both Dan and Tom are going to educate us on. We're very much, I'll finish just with this. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
This is such a strategic time in our constitutional republic's time to fight for liberty. And so there is no other time than now for people to get involved in preserving our liberty and making sure that we gain all of what's been lost back. So that's why this invite's going out to everyone. And we're really excited about what has been the response, and believe that as more people learn what we're looking to do on the 17th, that there'll be a good crowd.
Well, I have to tell you, Matthew, I consider you a special friend because, well, you say it like it is, and you've been so forthcoming on all of the issues like your childhood being at least attempted to be indoctrinated in Detroit in a school system that was really, well, it was designed to teach communism, and how you ultimately, your mother pulled you out of that school system because she recognized what was going on and recognized that it was going to be an awful mess for everyone, and how she really, I guess, brought all that to the attention of the other parents and the school district. And that that was 40 years ago, wasn't it? Over 40 years ago.
Yep.
So it's pretty amazing. Your story is a good one, and I've had opportunity to see you preach. You did a little bit of it at the Red Pill Expo last summer in Spokane, and I tell you what, it was fun, and I was impressed. And I really look forward to this event. I'm hoping that we have a good turnout for it, because it is a message that America needs to hear, and Christian America especially needs to hear it, because this is literally a battle between good and evil, and right now evil is on the gain on this thing, and good has been kind of watching from the sidelines. They can make it a little bit better by just watching and hoping that things change. They're not going to change without our involvement. Isn't that right?
That's true, without question. It's got to get personal for every Christian and for every man and woman of liberty. It's got to get personal.
It does. It has to get personal, and people need to realize, and this is something we've been emphasizing for the last couple of months on this radio show, we are a Christian nation. We were founded on Christian values. We were founded on common law, natural law, and what is the core of the Protestant church in this country. And that was what was really at the center of the movement for when we basically threw up the change of the monarchy under English rule. It was because we wanted liberty, we wanted to live under common law, we wanted to live under natural law, and we had such a strong group of Christian people living in this country that they had the will to do that. It's time to return to that same sense of Christian liberty that we had then.
Amen. I agree.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Tom DeWeese was not on the call a little bit earlier. I'm not sure what the problem is. He was supposed to join us. Hopefully, Joe, is Tom on yet?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm trying to text him and send him messages. I'm not sure what the problem is there, but I know he would plan on joining us. So, Matthew, let's talk about the Self-Reliance Initiative a little bit, because this is an area that, you've been trying to fundraise, you've been trying to work to make this program come together, and I'm quite certain that this project that you're doing on the 17th is geared to fundraising for that initiative. Let's talk a little bit more about what your vision is for that initiative.
I've been talking with pastors and other men and women of liberty of late in this area in regard to trying to reach out to, just as your friend does in Indianapolis, people who have been on drug addiction, people who have been on coming out of prison, also who were incarcerated people who are homeless, and the idea to reach out to them to bring in a place, an environment where there's not judgment of how they got there, but now that you're there, let's see how we can move you forward, with a different conclusion than just being on the government dole. And so I have gotten some ears on that. As you know, anytime you do anything that's worthwhile, it takes time. But we're pretty encouraged in regard to that. We have had some positive response from people. Eventually, within the next, we believe within the next year, we'll get to the place where, we can really put the Self-Reliance Initiative, and we call a resource center, one of them up and running. So then we can reach into and talk with and deal with many different churches and people in the community of Kettle Falls, and also in the urban area of Portland and Vancouver as well. That the need is great, and we are finding that people are beginning to respond more and more and more to it. But a part of the issue for fundraising isn't to pocket, but to get the word out. And getting the word out has been the main issue, more and more and more, and getting to the right ears, so then people are interested in formulating these centers in areas here in Washington. And so there have been some positive signs, but more is needed. And so if people are interested, of course, they can contact me by phone, 360-784-1695. I'd be glad to talk to them more about it. You can go onto my website, macummingsllc.com, and you'll see more that's written on there. Also, a number of other things that are going on there at the time.
Well, Matthew, I have to say I watch what you're doing, and I see programs like this, and they have a hard time getting traction. But once they get traction, they seem to do pretty well. One of the problems is that, of course, who's the one that you can get funding from pretty easily for programs like this? Well, gee whiz, it's the government. And that I know that's the antithesis of what you try to do with your program.
Yeah, I'm for your listeners and for all, and when I say this, I get that kind of look. I'm not doing this so then this will become another government program. We're looking to do this independent of federal money, which is the hardest thing, but it's the right thing. So that's why it's taking a little bit longer. But more and more hope has been building, and more and more ears have been opening, and more and more conversations have been happening too. And so, we do believe this is going to take off soon.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to tell you, we've talked about this a little bit yesterday, and we've talked about it before, but I really want to try to use the resources we have through the Red Pill Expo, and through the Freedom Force International, to be able to try to spread your message of liberty, because it's incredibly important. And there's a lot of people out there, if they just understood, the nature of the trap that they're allowing themselves to be part of, I think a lot of them would repel at that and turn their lives around. So that's why it's so important that programs like yours get really get heard and get the light of day.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I think maybe Tom DeWeese is on the program right now, and Tom, welcome to the radio show. You're going to be talking a little bit about what your message will be at the event that Matthew has planned on the 17th, and I really enjoy the fact that we're going to be sharing a podium because you are a very, very special patriot in this country, and I really have a tremendous amount of admiration for the work that you've been doing, as the president of the American Policy Center. So, if you will, kind of self-introduce and tell our listeners how you are going to be bringing the message of freedom to the Kettle Falls area.
Well, Dan, thank you for that very much. I appreciate that, and Matthew, it's good to be with you as well. The American Policy Center has been around for about 30-some years, and we have, over the last, say, 10 or so, have really focused on the issue of property rights and how they're being attacked from every angle of every level of government. And we talk about where this is coming from. There are all kinds of federal and even international policies that are attacking private property as a means to literally change our system of our society, our system of government. Of course, this stems back to Agenda 21 and even goes back further than that. These non-governmental organizations, these private organizations that are sanctioned by the United Nations, that get to go to the background of in the back rooms of the UN and write these policies, their own agendas, and then they present them in international meetings, and heads of state and diplomats and bureaucrats from all over the world sit there and say, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then they start implementing these in their own countries. And what it really is moving towards is to eliminate national sovereignty and eliminate, real representative government. It's funny, Dan. The United Nations looks at these non-governmental organizations like the Nature Conservancy and the World Wildlife Fund and the Sierra Club and just thousands of these organizations, National Education Association, Planned Parenthood. They call them civil society, and in their warped minds, these organizations are our representatives on the global front at the United Nations, and this is how they look at it. And if you look in your local community comprehensive plans, you will see how they talked to. We met with civil society and the stakeholders. That is all these groups. It's not you and me, citizens living in a community. It's these groups with these pre-planned agendas, and your local city councilmen, county commissioners, mayors, state legislators, in many cases, are sitting there sucking all this up, and they're going along with it, and you wonder why you have no impact on your own local government. So this is what we're doing, trying to represent this and let people know what's happening.
Well, let's pick it up on the other side of the break. I'd love to talk about this more, and let's take a break, and we'll be back shortly.
This is The Micro Effect. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and today our guests on the radio program are Pastor Matthew Cummings and Tom DeWeese. And we were just hearing from Tom about really what's behind so much of the movement to strip away our property rights. And I Tom, as we give you the floor for the next segment here, I want to mention the fact, and of course you mention this all the time, but the one common thread of all these UN programs and all these NGOs are that they do not believe in individual rights. They believe in collective rights. They believe in collectivism. And that means they are socialist or communist organizations pretending to be concerned about our best interests. And the reality is, because we are a republic as a nation, one of the things that stand at the center of that is individual liberty and individual rights and rule of law. We're not a democracy. We are a republic. And because we're a republic, we have laws that protect the rights of the individual. Therefore, it protects the rights of minorities because, democracy is nothing more than mob rule. Am I right on that, Tom?
Absolutely correct. Absolutely. I have a poster on my wall that says democracy is three wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for lunch. I think that it describes it exactly. In a democracy, the mob rule, it depends on what gang is in charge at the time and what your rights are. And this is what is so amazing to me is I watch how the left is moving, and they've captured so many of the minorities and the lower income people and so forth, telling them that our system, our Constitution, our free enterprise system, our private property, all that is somehow a monster that is keeping them down. And yet what we really have is a system where they, as an absolute individual, single individual, have their rights protected and cannot be controlled by that mob. That what is theirs, and nobody can take it. That's the way our system is set up, and they've been able to bastardize that to a point where they completely flipped it to make it sound like the only thing that will help the minorities, the only thing that will help the lower income people, is the mob rule. And now you see how it's affecting them, how they're living, and that's how it comes out. Just like what's transferred Venezuela, for example. So it's an amazing thing to watch how they're able to use doublespeak and lies. And I've been frustrated over the years because our side has just failed to fight back in a manner that needed to be done. We're good people, and we will listen to people and say, well, okay, we might be able to work with that, and so forth. But they keep pushing. There is no compromising with these people. Every time they gain 5%, they go for another 5 until they have 100%. That is their goal. That is how they operate, and that's what we're up against. And we have to stand up now and push back with a real force. Otherwise, we're going to lose these liberties, and people won't even know they existed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Pastor Matthew, that's always the center of the message that you're trying to convey to people, is that if you compromise with the devil, you're playing the devil's game, and there is no real compromise, because the reality is we've allowed ourselves to drift so far to the left through, and it's a two-party deal. I mean, the Republicans have been almost as guilty of this as the Democrats have been. The Republicans seem to be a little bit on the gutless side, and so they're constantly and the reality is we've got a two-party system now that takes turns playing good cop, bad cop, and thank God that we've got a president right now who is not part of the system, and boy, are they after him in a big way.
So thankful for President Trump, and our prayers go out for him as he is standing in a very difficult time for liberty, and that's why being allowed to be on the radio with two men of liberty right now encourages me and strengthens me and gives me courage to be even bolder.
Good.
Well, Matthew, I have to say, I've seen you in action, and all I can say is you are a human dynamo. I told you yesterday, thank you, Doris, for raising such a good man, and I really, truly mean that. So we need to be here. Tom, you and I need to be part of the group that's a support group for Pastor Matthew, because what he's trying to do is quite incredible.
I totally agree, and I don't want to embarrass Matthew when I say this, but when we met last year at the Red Pill Expo, I have never bonded with a man so quickly as I did with him. I love this man and what he's doing, and want to support him in every single way that I can. I really, really believe in him, and he's just a great human being.
Amen.
He really is, and we are going to be doing more of these red pills, and I told Matthew yesterday, I really want him and you to be part of all of these efforts to move forward with the red pill experience, because the reality is we've got to awaken an awful lot of Americans and a lot of people around the world to the reality that if we don't get off the couch and start doing something right away, there is not going to be a tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. That's they're moving rapidly on these programs, and I'm pleased I'm able to travel the country and I'm teaching people, and I am seeing a whole lot more people starting to get what we've been talking about for 27 years, and
Amen.
beginning to respond to it. And but it's still baby steps, and we have got a long way to go.
Well, we do, and we've got a short time to get there. I hate to say it, but if we see the efforts by the left to try and demonize the president, and they're terrified that if he gets another 4 years, as much as he's moving forward in his administration to try to let's say, expose and destroy the deep state, they know that their time's limited, so they're in battle mode full-time right now, 24/7, to try to destroy this man before the election. And all I can say is that, boy, we've got to get off the couch, and we've got to be out there helping him, because the way I see it, and I know he's not perfect, I know that for a fact, and I know there are a lot of people that just absolutely detest this man, but what he is doing is he is exposing the deep state in a way that no one else has ever done, and that is something that has to happen if we're going to take this country back.
Yeah, I look at other people who could have been elected president instead of him. I mean, from the Republican side, not Democrats, and I don't see anyone who ever would have stood up and taken what he's taken for the last 2 years and just keep moving. I think it energizes him that they come at him like that. He's a street fighter, and that's what we have needed. And I'm looking at Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, who was a speaker, and all that, and they did absolutely nothing when they had the majority. They didn't try to block anything Obama did, and they didn't try to support Trump for the 2 years or for the time they had when they had the majority, and they bucked him. And this is the problem. This is the root of the problem. The Republican Party of a bunch of wimps that don't really agree with their own platform, and we have got to get more good patriots like Trump to believe in this country. We've got to get them elected, and we've got to get these so-called Republicans out of there. It's just I think that's what we have to work on.
Yeah, and we've done some radio shows on this. I've got a good friend here in Montana. His name is Rick Jor. He's actually the only state legislator that was ever elected to office in Montana on his own constitutional ticket. And what a brilliant, wonderful man he is. But we've talked about the fact that we've got really a one-party system, that it's all progressive. Yeah, there's some fringe people on the in the Republican Party that were part of the Tea Party movement and some of those things, but most of them have been co-opted into this progressive mindset that's moving toward one world government. And that's what you speak about all the time, Tom, in your program, how one world government will destroy liberty for the United States of America.
Yeah, I mean, that is the root of it, and where these programs are coming from. And yet when I try to break it down to talk about how they're bringing it right down into your own community, of course I'm labeled a nutcase and a conspiracy theorist. And there have actually been headlines written about how I was in Rexburg, Idaho, and a reporter wrote an article that said most people don't see bike paths as a means to global tyranny, but Tom DeWeese does, and so that's how they ridicule us in trying to show how these programs are moving down into our local community. Well, let me just say this: one of the things that they're focusing on is getting rid of national sovereignty. Of course, having a president who's made national sovereignty and Americanism as the center of his whole thing, that shows you why there's such a division there. But getting rid of our national boundaries, our national sovereignty, this opens the way for the illegal immigration and a whole lot of other things. Now, they always use the environment as the excuse. We have to do this to protect the environment, and so we end up with all these different programs. Now, why did they pick the environment? The reason they picked the environment is because the environment knows no political boundaries. Rivers run through a whole lot of different towns and states, and we have the biospheres and all that sort of thing where the crops grow and so forth that don't recognize a political boundary. So you use the environment as a means to eliminate political boundaries. So we're looking at our national sovereignty. We're also looking at our counties, where you have 10 and 15 counties coming together to observe and to make programs for the entire region because it's to protect the environment. Well, there's also another boundary in the middle of that. That's the boundary that defines your yard, your private property. And so every one of those boundaries is under attack by these programs. The point isn't to protect the environment. The point is to get rid of those boundaries, and they're changing our system of government. If you've got 15 counties represented by non-elected people who were not elected to be on these certain councils, overlooking that many counties, then that has diminished your vote to vote for that one city councilman or that one county commissioner of how you want your county to run. And then the whole thing is funded by federal grants coming out of HUD, Department of Transportation, the EPA, others. They are all written by these same NGO groups that started all this at the UN level. So here is how it moves from the UN into your backyard through the American Planning Association and other groups like that, and these comprehensive blueprints that they're putting together in their communities. And this is how it's all being done, all the while being told to you, the public, this is local, local, local. This doesn't have anything to do with the United Nations. Well, I tell you, the first clue to look at it, if your plan is something like some kind of visioning 2050, 2030, 2040, that's your first clue. And if you don't believe that, go online and look up things like Jamaica 2050, Dubai 2050, and you will find the exact same language in your local plan as is in those plans. There is nothing local about it. This is a move to absolutely destroy our system of government and bring it under that global umbrella. And if you look at it, the United States is literally the only country that's ever been established with the purpose of government is to protect rights you were born with and protect your private property and so forth. And every other country, this gang in charge will tell you this is what your rights are today. Now you have that global cabal that is looking at what's the biggest problem they have. This darn United States that has this crazy outlook of things that people actually are born with their rights. We've got to undo that. And that's why the focus is on the United States the way it is in the attack.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, you were talking about NGOs and how they work through local governments to give the appearance of being local decision-making. And I want to give you an opportunity, because this is something you talk about, I talk about a lot myself in my programs, the Delphi technique, and the fact that our whole education system is skewed to teach socialism rather than individualism.
Yeah, that's the first thing. Ever since Jimmy Carter was able to get the National Department of Education in place, no longer do local votes for school board and local control of your education system count. And what they've ended up doing is they've created an education system that has nothing to do with academics. It has to do with behavior modification. A few years ago, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, I was interrupted by an email from a gentleman who was attacking an article that I wrote on global warming. He didn't like it, and the attacks he made, the usual attacks. Well, I looked up who he was. He was the head of an NGO, UN NGO, called the Eden Institute. And I looked on their webpage to see what they were about. And what they advocated was something called globally acceptable truth. And what they said on this website was the reason that we have war and strife and poverty in the world is because there's too much knowledge, and that we need to tell people, here's what you need to believe. We'll take care of all that for you in your life. You won't have to worry about all these decisions. Globally acceptable truth. And what it's come down to is the American education system really is based on globally acceptable truth. And you're only allowed to believe in global warming. You're only allowed to believe in government reactions and government solutions to everything in your life. And having private property, having individual choice, having a free enterprise system is all wrong. This is the entire American education system, and this is why we have these little snowflakes running around now who are crying and needing their Play-Doh if somebody disagrees with them. This is what they have brought these people to. This is the tactic to bring in getting Americans to completely throw out that bothersome Constitution that protects their rights and bring the UN in and do it. Now, the other thing, in the cities, as you mentioned, the Delphi technique, every single community is working on these comprehensive plans. And, of course, they're driven by these grants from HUD and the EPA and so forth. And what's really funny about it, well, that's not funny, what is tragic about it is that you will see them say, well, we brought this to the public. The public decided this is all local. Well, these meetings that they bring the public in, these Delphi techniques, the guy running them has a psychology background. He knows exactly what the outcome of this meeting is to be if he does everything right. And that will be that the entire community agrees with what they have to say. And they start putting a list on the blackboard and have people say, what do you think is a problem in the community? And blah, 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 blah. One of the things they'll do is they'll start to show a photograph of a beautiful community, and then they show a photograph of a ghetto. And they'll say, well, which one do you prefer? And people will say, well, I want the pretty one, please. Oh, you support planning. That's how they guide people in a direction. Now, if you understand what's going on there and you start to say some negative things about this, they will begin to use you as an example of negativity. And, for example, they'll bring something up and they'll say, even Tom could understand this. It's like an idiot like him should be able to accept this. And this is the technique they use. It's intimidation, it's psychology, and it has absolutely nothing to do with what they're talking about. It is them putting their goal in place and saying, well, the American people decided this. And, this is what's being done across the country. Now, one of the things I'm going to do with at Matthew's program is I'm going to do an audience participation exercise in which I bring people up and I'm literally going to show them how this works, how their government is being usurped, and what their government really looks like, not just those 5 elected county commissioners or something, but what really is behind it, and then what to do about it.
Yeah, that's terrific, Tom, because first of all, we need to identify the actors behind this whole program, and because they're not of us, they are not people who represent liberty, and the bottom line on every one of these programs and issues that they use Delphi technique on is a loss of property rights, a loss of our sovereignty, individual and national. It's all about taking away the rights of the individual, and that's at the heart of everyone. And if people who go to these meetings and they hear the word scoping or facilitator, the facilitator thing is the killer deal, because that means they've got a trained professional, as you say, who is a psychologist or has a background in psychology that knows how to twist the conversation, accomplish their preconceived goal.
Yeah, and preconceived is exactly it. That is what you have to watch for. That is exactly what they have done ahead of time. They've done this in the back rooms. They know exactly where this plan is going to go. And this is just a ploy to pretend like the community supports it. And then, of course, when somebody comes in and objects to it, say, well, the community decided. This is what the community wants. And this is what we are up against all the time. It's interesting that with the Green New Deal, which they brought out as a whole environmental thing. This is how it was sold, as protect the environment. They're now admitting that in its beginning it had nothing to do with environmental protection. It was an economic plan to destroy free enterprise. So they continue to push this, and we can go deeply into all these programs. We now are being told that single-family homes are racist and that they need to be eliminated, that there is a housing crisis and we don't have room for single-family homes in their backyards. All of this, I'm prepared to go into all of that as far as you want to go.
Well, it sounds like we're moving into the break. Matthew, I know you've got to go to another meeting, but can you hang on long enough to pick up on the top of the hour to just do a recap of how to get to your program?
Okay.
All righty. Thank you, and we're moving to a break.
This is The Micro Effect. The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl. Conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free, it was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their back confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand.
Welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and today we have Pastor Matthew Cummings and Tom DeWeese on the call, and we are talking about a program that is going to be happening on August 17th in Marble, and this is a program that Pastor Matthew is sponsoring and has put on. And Matthew, I know you've got to leave for another meeting, but I want to give you the opportunity to maybe again give the for the ladies who are selling the tickets there and talk a little bit more about the event itself and what you have planned.
Sure. It's, as what was said before, August the 17th at Marble, 3383 Highway 25 North, Northport, Washington, from 10 to 6. Admission, $20 individual, $30 family, children $5 and under free. For contact information, you can call Kim at 509-675-3872 and Constance 509-999-0444. The program is set up for a time of fundamentals as far as educating people about how far liberties have been taken, and yet that it's not too late for us to rise up and take back our great constitutional republic and protect our property rights. Also, there'll be an opportunity to eat together as far as fellowship, and also learn more about how they can get involved in the fight from Brother Tom DeWeese and you, Brother Dan Happel. And basically, instead of a normal revival as what normally I would do as a Pentecostal pastor, we're doing what I call a revival of liberty, getting people excited about getting personal with protecting their personal liberties and protecting their property as well.
Well, and Matthew, again, I see you as being very typical of the Black Robe Regiment that stood up, the pastors that stood up and were part of the American Revolution because they knew we needed freedom and we needed the rights of the individual, and were willing to sacrifice everything to stand up against the Crown and the Church of England, and in the process put themselves at tremendous risk. And I see you as being that kind of really patriotic gentleman, and I thank you for doing programs like this. I also want to mention, though, that this is a bit of a fundraiser and a knowledge base for your self-reliance initiative, and I want to give you a minute or two to talk about the self-reliance initiative and how important it is for people to learn how to stand up and stand on their own two legs and get away from government programs.
Yeah, it unfortunately, because of how our educational system has been set up and how the left has done a lot of promoting, too many people are just too dependent on the federal government. A lot of people in Stevens County are literally on the go itself. And so this concerns me, and this is why through many years of prayer and other things, we've just beginning to try to put together the Self-Reliance Initiative, an initiative that will encourage people to move from dependency to independency, and through different options, encouraging homeless, encouraging people who have been incarcerated, encouraging people who have been on drug addiction to move in a different direction. So we're trying to set up Self-Reliance Initiative resource centers across the country eventually, but right now in Kettle Falls and here in Washington, we're looking to get one set up so then we can indeed bring in conservative people who have been in the trade industry to come in and see if we can sway people to move away from being on welfare, as well as a 25-year plan that we're looking to do that will eventually help urban areas revitalize without federal assistance. And so it's a long plan, but one that's needed. Everything with Self-Reliance Initiative, there'll be no federal funding in it, because I do not believe that you can talk to a people about getting away from depending on the federal government and then taking federal money yourself. That's hypocritical. So it's a longer plan, but it's beginning to get more life, and we're very encouraged by it. That's why to have you two men to come and educate the people on liberty and what's going on is so exciting. And my church is very excited because it's the first time that, although people have been voting in the process, it's the first time that they're getting a taste of being what I call stewards of liberty.
Well, Matthew, I thank you for that compliment. I know Tom does too. And the thing that people, we've moved so far away from having self-respect and understanding that the responsibility of freedom is participation. The responsibility of being a free person, not a slave, a free person is the ability of taking care of yourself and your loved ones and really relying on yourself and not on others to do everything for you. That's what this whole program is all about, and that's what your Self-Reliance Initiative is all about. And right, there is hope there, because the bottom line is the people who are selling you on the idea of bigger and bigger and bigger government, and as Tom says, global government, and global communist or socialist government. And the difference between a communist and a socialist is a communist is a socialist in a hurry. The reality is they're all part of the same duck. If it quacks and looks like a duck, it's a duck. And communism and socialism are really ugly twin sisters of one another. One is just a little bit the other one. And so the reality is, yes, we need to depend on ourselves. And the progressives that are running the programs that are creating bigger and bigger government are also the same ones that don't think you ought to be able to make your own decisions, that somehow they're so much smarter than we are that they should be leading us and telling us what to do and take away all of our rights, because they know much better than we do. And that's, boy, if that isn't the heart of the environmental movement, I don't know what is. Tom, Matthew, thank you. I don't know if you can stay on a little longer. If you can, do.
No,
if not,
I gotta go.
All righty. Well, thank you, and God bless you, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks up in Marble. And I look forward to the meeting and getting a chance to talk to your parishioners up there. So, God bless you, my friend.
God bless you all. Bye.
See you, Matthew.
All righty. Well, Tom, We really know how to stir the pot, don't we? All I can say is that all roads lead to Rome, and every time you get in the middle of these discussions, it always leads back to the same thing, and that is total top-down control of everything we do. And these environmentalists who are at the heart of UN Agenda 21, they could care less about individual rights and private property. They're so much smarter than we are. They need to control everything we do. Am I right on that?
Yeah, they talk about it all the time, that we cannot allow people to have control of their own lives. That's chaos. That we have this perfectly organized society, and I mean they actually even talk about the idea that we need zero economic growth, no growth at all, because that would upset our well-organized plan. And I lots of times compare this to, Alexander the Great and Thomas Jefferson lived in the same world. They each lit their homes with candles, and their transportation was horseback. They moved at the same speed. And, that's over 1,000 years. But along comes, in the late 1890s, a gentleman who figured out how to bring electric power and lights into our homes, Thomas Edison. And he completely changed the whole system. Nobody was planning on that. It wasn't in part of the plan. Everything had always been this other way since the beginning of human society. Then along, a few years later, comes this other guy, Henry Ford, who creates a new form of transportation. And then, to really blow everybody's mind, along come the Wright brothers, and now we're flying like birds. And society changed, industry changed, the economy changed, everything changed because of that. And these guys, these so-called environmentalists, who are not environmentalists, their programs hurt the environment more than it helps. These globalists are determined to never, ever have another Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, or Wright brothers disrupt them. And they're talking zero economic growth, and everybody gets the exact same pay, which I don't know where they're supposed to be coming from, government, I guess. So there is no incentive to move forward. This is what brings down communist countries once they get control, is that they have totally eliminated the incentive for anyone to do anything. And the hard workers who are the ones they need to keep things going, to keep producing, to keep building, and they finally look around and say, why am I breaking my back? I get the exact same money as this guy over here to live on who does absolutely nothing. I'm not going to do anything either. That's when it begins to collapse around them. And, that's what you've seen happen in Venezuela. Cuba continues to be a prison colony, and the Soviet Union collapsed that way. China went after it in a different way, and that's why they exist today. But they're a total surveillance society, which is where we're headed in this country. And they're working to get control of all of our system of government, our system of economics, and our private property. And once that is done, then we are just like these other socialist communist countries, and incentive will be gone. There's no way to move forward. We already have today. It's almost impossible to start your own small business today. Everything is these corporations. That's because these corporations are the ones that play ball with the sustainabilists on the inside of government. They get tax breaks. They get all the goodies that go with it. They get to choose the best places to put their businesses. And so a local business, a mom-and-pop shop, can't compete against that, and they're disappearing. And that is the means of globalizing our economy and taking away the free enterprise system.
Well, and Tom, a big part of this gigantic plan, and anybody that doesn't see it as a very diabolical and gigantic plan, but the core that will make this work in their minds socialism and communism have never worked because they never quite got it fulfillment of its potential. And so they envision an entire world controlled under communism and socialism. And if they can control everything and control all governments and control all enterprise and everything else, somehow they think that's going to lead to success. And the reality is that we will be living in the most despotic, really subhuman culture in world history. We'll go to a new dark age because we will literally. They've even said it. They want us to go back to a Stone Age culture because that is sustainable. And all the inventions of the last 5,000 years, they see them as being unsustainable.
Absolutely correct. And the fallacy of their whole plan, all the attempts to put communist governments around the world in the past have the reason that they lasted as long as they did is because they had the West, they had the United States, England, other countries that were practicing free market, and they were propping them up. Henry Ford brought trucks into Russia and set up a truck factory there, and capitalism was propping up communism. And now China, as I said, went at it in a different way. They got involved in the market, and they pretended that they were doing some free market things, and so they've lasted a little bit longer. But it's going to collapse. But what are they counting on when they have completely taken over the entire civilized world, and the United States now becomes the same as them, and we're socialists? There's nothing left. There's nowhere left to go. There's nothing left to prop them up. And as you said, it will be the dark ages unlike anything human society has ever experienced when they succeed in doing all this. It will be a tyranny. Look what we're looking at now. You say anything opposite of what they believe. You've got Antifa, and you've got all these other groups attacking in anything that is said contrary to what they say. How do you live with? We are not an anthill. That is the fallacy of communism. And we have individuals who think different ways. And you always have that one guy standing back there going, if you did it this way, that might improve how easy this is to get done. In a communist society, he is shot. It's a fallacy. Put him in prison. And in a free market, we say, hey, that'll work. And then you've created a whole new industry. That's the difference between the two. And it is they're destroying the economy. As we have begun to destroy private property rights in this country, what have you seen? We have seen the country become less valued, because private property ownership is the only means for the average person to raise their own personal wealth. It is the only true means to eradicate poverty. Every single poverty program we've ever had, whether it's a government program or a private program, is based on the idea of redistribution of wealth. And take from this guy and give to this guy. Tomorrow this guy needs some more, and we got to take some more, we're going to take some more. Never in those programs is there ever really a focus on how to eliminate poverty. And instead, it's just put a Band-Aid on it and take care of it. This is what I'm excited about what Matthew is doing, because he's looking at ways to eliminate it and help people bring themselves up on their own. But every single poverty program we have today is based on redistribution of wealth. Every program in the United Nations is based on redistribution of wealth. All that means is everyone ends up finally being equally poor. And that's the goal. That's where they're heading, because you're a lot easier to maneuver and control when you don't have a means to fight back.
Yeah, you're right. And one perfect example of the race to the bottom, and that's really what communism is a race to the bottom, is our education system, where the socialists have been in charge. They've been working under a Dewey inspired system of social school systems until now we have no one can lose, everyone has to be a winner, everybody gets a prize, and what we do is we've got a race for the lowest common denominator, not the highest common denominator. And as a result, our school systems are nowhere nearly as good at educating as they were even a generation ago.
Absolutely. I just read a report yesterday, I get this right, in Baltimore, which is now in focus in the country right now about the failures of these programs. They did a search a couple years back of 9 different schools in Baltimore, and they couldn't find a single minority student who could do math problems or could read. You know, this is the whole system. It has nothing to do with academics. If you have a child who's bringing home an algebra book, an English book, or literature book or a history book or something, I would challenge you to look in that book and see what you see in that book. In many, many cases, you will find no academics in there. You will find propaganda and behavior modification, and this is every turn in the education system. We under Clinton with Goals 2000, School to Work, workforce development boards, they told us this. One of the things about the education system then. And I was on Capitol Hill a lot trying to fight these programs, and I was being told by members of Congress and stuff that what we're going to do is we're going to get computers in every classroom, and when you've got a slower student or a faster student, we can use the computers to create a system that works at their level. Everybody will then be learning together. It'll be exciting. You know what the computers were used for? The computers were used to test and test and test until the child started to answer the questions the way they wanted them answered. Had nothing to do with academics. It was about behavior modification. What are your attitudes, values, and beliefs? We're going to test you again and again. What are your attitudes and values and beliefs today? Oh, you're making progress. When you finally start answering all the questions according to the way they want to, which have nothing to do with academics but have to do with attitudes, values, and beliefs, then, the system worked. And this became the education system in America, and this is why we have these people today, these children that we see out there now. It's such tragic. They are victims of this program. They don't know any better. Nobody ever taught them anything except you need to think this way and act this way, and that's the perfect global citizen, and that's what it's all based on.
Mm-hmm. And there was a recent poll that indicated, and I can't remember who put on this poll, but there was a recent poll of people under 20 years old, and 82% of them that were tested said that they supported socialism rather than capitalism. That's exactly what all this re-education is all about, is to destroy the ideas that are fundamental to the United States of America and our constitutional republic.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said earlier. You know, you had the United States with all these crazy attitudes and beliefs based on what the rest of the world was built on. And what are we going to do about that? You know, if we're globalists that are going to take over the world, we've got to fix this. And that's exactly the means that they're using to fix it. You take away one generation, and you can completely erase a country's history and everything it stood for. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's Tom. That's also part of you mentioned China and the success they're having in China with bringing in free market enterprise and capitalist, let's say, fundamental processes, and then trying to convert them to a top-down control grid system. And they're doing it. Google is a kind of a primary architect of this social engineering program that they are calling social credits. And I know you have even written articles about that. The social credit system in China is based on all these ideas that promote collectivism and all these ideas that promote thinking of the collective rather than the individual. And if you stand out, your social credit score goes way down. And they figure out a way to make sure that you toe the line.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what they're doing. And of course, tie into that all the surveillance cameras and everything all the means they have for personal surveillance, things you say, things you do, your actions. All of these things are used to judge you in that very system you just said, and that's where it's going. And when we talk about China using the free market system to prop themselves up, the truth is there literally are no private Chinese companies. When was the last time you ever met a Chinese entrepreneur? Somebody who, we're always honoring people who have really built a business up and as an individual and so forth. They don't come from China. China it's all government controlled. So there is no private property. There is no private companies there. But yet they put these companies out. They're government-based companies that are producing goods and services, but it's all through the government, and it's not an individual entrepreneur that is benefiting from that. And then you end up with the people who work in these factories there, that they're making some incredibly minimal wage and working incredible hours and so forth to produce for the state. So, that's the Chinese model.
Yeah, and this new corporatism that we're seeing worldwide that falls into the camp of the social engineers. We used to call that fascism, and what it boils down to is government control of private industry, but that private industry may be privately owned, but is so controlled by the government that it might as well just be a government enterprise.
Yeah, you have the public-private partnerships, and you actually have some libertarian organizations promoting these as free enterprise, which just leaves me in shock when I hear that. But the public-private partnerships between government and business, as you said, it's right out of the Mussolini fascist playbook. And the businesses get the benefit of getting all the government goodies. They actually act like governments. And as I said earlier, they get the tax breaks. They get the best place to put their companies, free of a whole lot of regulations. They're able to use this to put their competition out of business. The government gets to hide behind the independence of the business. And one of the ways this works is that instead of having to put a whole bunch of new regulations on, the businesses are the ones that do it. For example, what you hear in advertising today in all over the place is, this is sustainable, this is sustainable product. And so the government's pushing these sustainable programs. The businesses are using their advertising budgets to promote it, to get the American people to accept it. The only products you want are the sustainable products. Of course, in that, we don't hear that the sustainable products cost you more and probably aren't a whole lot of the producers, the farmers, the ranchers, the cattlemen, so forth, are put out of business because of these programs. And we don't know where these products are coming from, what country they're coming from. Country of origin labeling is taken off. This is happening in the beef industry right now. And then you begin to hear of diseased chickens, diseased beef, and this is coming from foreign products. Right now, Tyson's Chicken, and Tyson's is one of the main packers of the beef industry. And there's only 4, really, packers focusing on enforcing this sustainable product. They are now getting their cattle and their chickens from China. They're processed in China and shipped here, and then they're sold like they're American. That is one of the fallacies that's taking place. And I'm working with the cattle industry right now, trying to find a way to get this message out and let the American consumer understand their own health, their own private choice of what they want to put on their dinner plate is being taken away from them by these very policies. They've put together the Sustainable Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and the main beef industry, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, is going along with this, and they're allowing the World Wildlife Fund to make these decisions. The World Wildlife Fund is one of the most powerful environmental groups in the world. They're one of the top 3 working with the United Nations, and they have said meat consumption is devastating some of the world's most valuable and vulnerable regions due to the vast amount of land needed to produce animal feed, and the way to protect the earth is to eliminate the consumption of beef. And the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is allowing these animals to come in there and control their industry, and they're destroying the beef industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, break coming up. Let's pick it up on the other side, and we will really get into the weeds on sustainable development. Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots, and I need to let our listeners know that we have a new sponsor called 7K Metals, and right now the stock market is sitting at historic highs, but how much longer can this last? We know that the 2008 banking crisis nearly brought down the whole world financial system and only managed to kick the can down the road a few years by saddling American taxpayers with trillions in additional debt. That was 11 years ago, and national and personal debt levels are much worse today, pushing us to the point where the dollar is nearly worthless. Gold and silver have been the only true money for many thousands of years, and maybe the only asset class left standing when the inevitable global financial collapse happens. You buy insurance for your car, home, and life to prepare for life's mishaps. Why not purchase some insurance for the inevitable world financial meltdown, especially if that insurance is better than money in the bank and available at wholesale prices? And I want to tell the listeners this 7K Metals program is much like Costco or Sam's Club. It is really an opportunity to buy at wholesale prices that you would not otherwise be able to buy at. So please support Connecting the Dots and ensure your financial survival by joining me at danhappel.com and click on the 7K Metals icon to learn more about a program that could be the best financial insurance policy in America. I really want folks to listen and see what they have, because I do believe it would be something that all of our listeners could value from. Tom, we were talking about so-called sustainable development, and one of the things that come out on sustainable development is how totally unsustainable it is if you're talking liberty. It is the antithesis of sustainable liberty. Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. You look at so many of the programs, as you said earlier very well, about leading us back to the Stone Age, that every development over the last 5,000 years was not sustainable, needs to be gotten rid of. Sustainable development is focusing on all those things. Every single thing we try to do becomes ruled, regulated. And you notice this both in the cities and in the rural areas. In the rural areas, we started saying when Agenda 21 was put in place that the plan was to herd people off the rural areas and into the cities. People say, "Oh, come on, how do you do that?" Well, the answer to that question is you control the water, you control the land, you make it impossible to live there, and people have no choice. And you have thousands and thousands of farmers who have now left their land and have moved into other places in the cities and stuff, because they couldn't live there anymore because of the rules and regulations. And one of the things, you have people like Dave Foreman of Earth First, one of the most radical environmental organizations in history. He created what was called the Wildlands Project, and what this called for was, his words, rewilding 50% of all the land in every state back to the way it was before Christopher Columbus came here. And you think, well, those are the ravings of a green lunatic. Well, his ravings became the basis of the United Nations Biodiversity Treaty, and this is being implemented around the world. Even though the U.S. Senate did not ratify the Biodiversity Treaty, you've got federal agencies, the EPA and others, that are quickly implementing these programs. And they talk about controlling all the water, all the rivers, the creek beds, and so forth, that they call these navigatable waterways, and that they have to control them. Again, what I said earlier, when the environment doesn't recognize political boundaries, so these rivers run through a whole lot of jurisdictions. And, well, we've got to control that, because you can't have this guy doing this down on this end, because that affects all these people on the other end. And so they use that as the excuse. And the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, is a terrorist organization operating on the Great Plains. And ranchers who have had, for 150 years, have had their rights to water and grazing of their land and so forth, all of a sudden are told, you can't do that anymore. And they cut off the farm animals, from cattle and so forth, from being able to get to the water. And it's just a tyranny that's taking place there that they can't survive.
Yeah, these people, it's like Ed Griffin says about the these people are scientists. They have figured out how to manage and maneuver and create situations that accomplish their ultimate goal. It's like the Delphi technique on steroids. And you mentioned the beef industry. I live in ranching country. I've got a ranch, and the reality is that a lot of the farmers and ranchers, to try to get along with all these different agencies and all these new regulations, are playing into their game. They really are, because they allow all these things to happen to them, and they allow all these regulations to go in place, and they keep saying, well, my idea is that we've got to work with these people because down the road work with us. Well, guess what? They don't do it that way. And all these wolf introductions and all these different programs that they are doing are designed to destroy the meat producers in this country, because one of the top things under UN Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 is the elimination of meat consumption. Don't make any mistake about it. This is a plan that is designed to destroy all the things that we believe in. Right, Tom?
Absolutely. I asked that question about why are they as a National Cattlemen's Beef Association, allowing the World Wildlife Fund in and guiding these things. And what I was told was that the cattlemen for decades have been under siege by radical environmentalists, by the animal rights movement, and they just want to work their land. They just want to do what they do, and so they're tired, and they want to make this go away. And they decided, well, as a safety valve, okay, we use this word sustainable. How bad can it be? And we'll just do that, and then that'll be a pressure safety valve, and it'll go away. Well, the truth of the matter is it won't go away, because the goal is to put them out of business. And they have got to realize this. Cattlemen across this country have got to realize that is the goal. They have done a huge job on the pork industry and on the poultry industry in the same way, and the cattlemen are now next in line. And the World Wildlife Fund, down in Brazil, they have managed to take 50% of the land in Brazil and put it into useless parks, and that is unusable by anybody else. And that is having a huge effect on the economy. And this is what they intend to do. That 50-50-50 that you keep hearing about, 50%, just share. It is an absolute attack on private property and on these industries.
Yeah, and look at the maps of the world maps for sustainable development and the rewilding of America and virtually the whole West, other than a few pockets of very highly centralized city populations like Denver, Salt Lake, and Seattle, and places like that. The rest of it on their map is red, which indicates that it's part of a complete rewilding of America. Well, guess what? All those ranchers and all those people that were out there on that environment, they have plans to eliminate them, and the ranchers and the farmers need to realize they're serious about what they're talking about. This isn't a pie-in-the-sky thing.
Now, that red means no human activity, and what they're really good at is setting up, saying, well, this is a biosphere area, this is a protected area, and then they say, well, we'll put a buffer zone around that, and there can be limited activity there. Well, what people don't understand is that buffer zone is a cancer cell. It is used to begin to cut off human activity. And as soon as they can cut off that human activity, then it becomes red. And then there's a new buffer zone put in place. And like I said, it runs like a cancer cell. It runs right through it. The World Wildlife Fund, working with some other groups, they have their eye on the northern Great Plains. And that's about 180 million acres, and it crosses 5 U.S. states and goes into Canada. And what they want to do to conquer that and to completely put it out of any human activity on this is taking over the livestock, the grazing acres, and going into Montana. They call it wildlife restoration. Well, this is thousands and thousands of acres that they're looking at there to suddenly be wildlife restoration. One of the things that the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef is telling in order to go along with this, the ranchers have to set aside so much of their land for the wildlife restoration. And what they're doing, as I said earlier, there are only 4 packing companies in this country, and you've got Tyson's, and you've got one called JBS, and a couple of other ones, and they put these rules on, and what they say is you have to be completely sustainable compliant in order for us to buy your cattle. The cattlemen don't have a market themselves. It's the packing companies that have the groceries and have the steakhouses and have whatever, where they sell the beef product. And if the cattlemen, if the packers won't buy their product, then they have nowhere to sell them. And they're trying to stand up to this. They're trying to fight back. There's a wonderful organization called RCAF that is leading the fight to try to stop all of this. But they're outgunned, and this is huge. So this is what we're looking at. What's going to happen is eventually your choices. If you want to buy beef in the grocery, your choices are going to go downhill. You're going to find a lesser grade product. You're going to find skyrocketing prices, and you're going to hear more of these stories about tainted beef. That is not coming from American cattlemen. That is coming from overseas. It could be coming from China, other places. So it's amazing. They put these rules about we're going to make everything better by following these sustainable rules, but they're allowing the substandard product to come in from countries that don't follow these things and are not clean like the United States. And the bottom line is our food is going to be tainted. Our choices for food is going to diminish. Here's one of the things they say in saying why the American beef is not sustainable. they say that the grazing land that is used for beef could be converted to growing wheat and soy, and that could feed a whole lot more people cheaper than growing beef. Well, everything dealing with sustainable development is based on everything's a crisis. We've got a crisis. We've got to manage this. We don't have a food crisis in this country or in most of the world. The places where you have a food crisis is where these totalitarian policies are in place in the first place. We don't have that, so there's no crisis. We don't need to do that. The second thing is, most people who understand the environment will tell you that land used for grazing in many, many cases cannot be converted to growing wheat and soy. So that's an absolute lie that that's what they want to do with it. But that's what they're telling people. The crisis will have to feed more. Everything here is leading towards a vegan diet. And that's the private agenda of these organizations trying to put this in place. They want to stop beef consumption. And so they use these lines about make it safer, make it better, we can feed more this way. I'm not eating tofurkey for Thanksgiving. I'm sorry, it's not going to be on my table,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I have to tell you, you're absolutely right about the way they do this, because almost all grazing, certainly in Montana, is on ground that isn't productive, wheat or other, soybeans or anything else. We don't have the water, and we don't have, it's not ground suited for that kind of crop production. It's suited for grazing, and that's exactly what it's suited for. And incidentally, Tom, and you know this, you've been working with these cattle producers. If you take the cattle off that land and leave it, just don't graze it, it's only a matter of time, and the quality of the grass grows down, and the weeds start coming in, invasive weeds come in, and that ground is nowhere nearly as productive with no cattle on it, with cattle on it, and I've seen that time after time. And incidentally, I have to tell you a story. I've got a friend, and he really is a good guy, who was with the Sonoran Institute. He was a range biologist. He was educated as a range biologist. And he said, Dan, I'm going to show you a picture. And I have to tell you, we show this picture to people, and it's pretty amazing. He showed a fence line, and on one side it was overgrazed and beat up and in bad shape, and on the other side it was green and productive, and it was on the same range. And he said, okay, now which one was grazed by cattle and which was grazed by buffalo? And I knew that was a trick question, so I said, well, obviously the good side is the cattle side. He said, you're absolutely right, but you can't imagine the number of people who believe that cattle overgraze and that buffalo are a wonderful thing, and it's quite the contrary.
Absolutely, yeah. These cattlemen, in many, many, many cases, are second, third, fourth generation, been on their land maybe 100, 150 years, and they did not survive all that time by destroying the land. They know they are the stewards of the land. They know how to operate it. And I many, many times, semi-jokingly say, if the environmentalists would come out of their high-rises in New York City and actually touch the ground, they might know something about the environment. But all these policies that they put in place are damaging the environment. Wind power. It's really funny. Years ago when I first started on these issues, I'd be on a program like yours, and somebody would call in, and they'd be an environmentalist, and they'd say, you want to pave the earth. You're part of the AstroTurf crowd. And the truth of the matter is, back then, I know this has changed drastically since then, but I was told by an expert, if we wanted to just eliminate or make up the shortage of electricity in the state of California, this was back in the 90s, we would need, using just wind power, we would need an area the size of Connecticut. you would have the entire state of Connecticut paved over with all the under wiring and so forth, the cement and all that goes with its wind turbines, just to make up the shortage in California. Imagine what we would have to do to convert completely to wind and solar today. Who wants to pave the earth? Not me. But this is their policies. Yeah. This is how completely stupid their policies are.
Absolutely, and the best power in the country, the best and most reliable power generation in the country is hydroelectric. And what are they doing? They're trying to tear down all the dams and eliminate hydroelectric power and bring in very unreliable. I mean, the average is only efficient about 17 to 23% of the time, even in very windy areas. So what do you have to have when that wind's not blowing? Well, then you've got to have that dirty old coal and all the other things. So really what you're doing is you're subsidizing stupidity.
Yeah. And I mean, the wind turbines, I've been told, take, just to produce the turbine, the steel and so forth in it, takes more energy than it will ever produce in its lifetime, not to mention that for it to turn, the turbine to turn, it needs oil. And if you have these forests of these things across the country, the one thing you won't have is anything flying in the air. They are destroying, birds and endangered birds and bats and so forth. Even the Audubon Society calls them Cuisinarts in the air. But this is environmentally correct. It is insanity, and it will be the end of human civilization if they succeed in moving this across the country.
Well, Tom, I have to tell you, I am so much looking forward to seeing you in a few weeks here in Marvel at Matthewsdale, because, boy, do we speak the same language. And obviously, I've been working on Agenda 21. You have too, for a lot of years. We're getting close to the end of the show, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk about a number of your programs, about the American Policy Center, about some of the books that you've written, and how people can support the programs that you're doing.
Yeah. We, the American Policy Center, as I said earlier, we are really focusing. I see the private property issue as the real means to bring it down to a pinpoint. Sustainable development, as we're discussing here, is so vast, covering every aspect of our lives. And what I tried to do was get it down to where the average person could really focus on it. The fact of the matter is, sustainable development has kryptonite built in it, and they don't want you to know about this. That kryptonite is private property. They cannot implement sustainable development without destroying private property. And I'm teaching people across the country, I'm going to do it at Matthew's event, that if you can protect private property on the local level, then you can begin to restore our freedoms as a nation. And I'll talk about how that we can do that and so forth. And we've really focused on putting tools together to help the local activists, give them the background, give them ideas on what to do. I can't go into this one detail at the moment, but we're on the verge of putting something together. I think, as I've described it before, will be the atom bomb for our side on how to protect property rights and individuals. And we're working on putting that together right now, and I'm really excited to get that out here in the next couple of months. I've written, you go on our website at AmericanPolicy.org, and you'll see we've got several tools that we've put together like this. But I've been able to write 3 different books on the subject. 2 of them are policy books. The first one was called Now Tell Me I Was Wrong, and that was really a collection of articles that went into all these issues and the background and who was behind it and so forth. And I even said on the cover of it, I put this out around the time the Tea Party came out. Why is there a Tea Party? Because these policies are now being implemented, and people are finally understanding there's something wrong here. This book will tell you where they came from and who did it. That was my first book. My second book was a novel. I never wrote fiction before in my life. It's titled Erase, but it's based on all of this stuff, and it has been compared to Atlas Shrugged in 1984, to my utter shock. And then my final book, Sustainable, The War on Free Enterprise, Private Property, and Individuals, is a handbook for activists to use for all this stuff that we're talking about. It's all on the website.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for being our guest on the radio program. And I have to tell our listeners, Tom's books are extremely readable. He's a former newspaper. He knows how to write. I welcome our guests, our listeners to come back next week and help us connect a few more dots. And Tom, I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks, and we'll have a lot of fun in Washington together.
I do too. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you, and join us again next week.